and Arnold with the National Taxpayers Union. Let me start with you, Scott. You know, it's interesting because Jen Psaki's statement suggested that somehow this bill would curb spending. They've even gotten Janet Yellen over the weekend to somehow ditch all her economic knowledge and say, yeah, all this extra spending is somehow going to curb inflation, knowing that's a sweet spot. Americans really are afraid of this bill now.
Yes, inflation's the hot button, Charles, and it's pretty simple math, actually. If you draw a correlation graph between inflation rates and the spending in D.C., they're pretty tight because obviously injecting all this money into the system via M2, for example, has really spurred a lot of inflation concerns. And another quick thing about the comments that were made earlier is like, you know, they're talking about this being a job creation bill. We've got 11 million jobs unfilled out there in the economy, and we don't have the labor force to even attack those. Are we so worried about creating new jobs on top of those? That doesn't seem like a big concern, and the inflation part certainly is.
Another concern, obviously, Brandon, are the taxes and all the different tax gimmicks that they've come up with. What do you think of the latest ones that apparently they say will mean that this bill costs nothing, that it has zero costs to the American public?
Well, I think that's absolutely ridiculous. It's fantasy land math to say that this thing costs nothing. When you look at the IRS expenditure, they say if they put $80 billion into the IRS, they'll get $400 billion in additional tax revenue back. Well, CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, says that's ridiculous. They say it's $200 billion. So they're doubling the amount of expected revenue here. They're basically making up numbers. And all Manchin is asking for, I give him a lot of credit, is to actually see how much these provisions cost. Let's see what this bill cost before they vote on it, instead of Nancy Pelosi's let's pass this thing and then find out what's in it.
You know, Scott, a poll over the weekend, NBC poll showing 71% of the country saying we're on the wrong track. Even more telling, with these two spending bills, more than 30% said it would hurt people like me. The American public, I guess something happened. There's been a general epiphany from that first tranche of money that the Biden administration put out, the $1.9 trillion, and the after effects of it. It's so interesting to see people saying, no more free money in this economy because it's actually costing me more money.
Yeah, and they keep it flowing. And it just goes to show you the ego in D.C. to kind of ignore what the American people want and desire. And I give props to people who are answering those questions correctly and honestly, because somebody's got to get the message across to our friends in D.C. that this spending is out of control. It's not helping. It's hurting because of the inflation concerns, and it's keeping people home instead of going back to work in some cases. And therefore, it's completely unproductive. So they've got to change their role on this or change their realization on this out of D.C., or else this is going to get a lot worse.
Yeah, and of course, Brandon, the main thing, of course, is when we talk inflation, we're talking gas prices. It's the most insidious of all of them. It's a tax on everyone, and the poorer the household, the more deleterious it is. And that doesn't seem like there's any stop in sight for higher gas prices.
No, in fact, this bill would make it worse. What it would do is make it more difficult and more expensive to extract energy, natural gas, oil from U.S. soil. So it's going to restrict supply, increase costs, make gas prices even higher, make it harder to heat your home during these cooler months here. It's going to make inflation worse and hurt average families even more.
Scott, real quick, this notion of taxing unrealized gains is so weird. Everyone's pushing back against it. I'm not sure if that's still floating around there, but your thoughts on the impact of the market?
Well, look, Charles, I mean, that is the low-hanging fruit of a tax plan, frankly, because we've had such a boost in the stock market prices and other unrealized gains that people have maybe in private investments because of the fact that we had that great recovery. So it makes some sense to me that that would be where the administration would go. As far as the market impact, I don't think the market believes it's going to happen. So right now, the market is whistling by the graveyard as they kind of await what's going to be this new tax plan, as you mentioned earlier, how they're going to pay for some of these spending bills.
Yeah.
But certainly if that does go through and get in a bill, that's going to be hurtful to stocks.
A lot of people saying, okay, you're going to tax unrealized gains, so I get a credit in those years when I have unrealized losses. Guys, thank you both very much. Appreciate it. So are the president